Look at this photograph. The Winter Palace, St. Petersburg. 1,000 rooms, marble floors, gold leaf ceilings, crystal chandeliers weighing 3 tons each. Built in the 1750s, they tell us, by Russian serfs, with hand tools, in the middle of winter, in a swamp. But here's what they don't tell you. Here's the detail that shatters everything. There are no bathrooms. None. Zero. In a palace with 1,000 rooms, built for the wealthiest people on Earth, there is not a single bathroom designed into the original structure. Does that make sense to you? Does that sound like a building made for human beings? Or does it sound like something else entirely? Like maybe, just maybe, we've been lied to about who built these structures, about when they were built, about why they're really here. Because once you see this detail, you can't unsee it. And once you start looking, you realize it's not just the Winter Palace. It's everywhere. Every single palace, every cathedral, every government building from the so-called 18th and 19th centuries. No bathrooms, no kitchens, no chimneys that make sense. Just enormous, technologically impossible structures that appeared in the historical record almost overnight, with no logical explanation for how primitive societies built them. We're about to go deep. And I'm warning you now. By the end of this, you will question everything you were taught about history. Let me walk you through the Winter Palace again. Slowly, this time. 1,500 rooms, spanning over 200,000 square meters. Heated, they claim, by wood-burning fireplaces. Except the chimneys don't match. They're decorative, non-functional. Many of them don't even connect to flues. So how is this building heated in the Russian winter? Temperatures dropping to minus 30 degrees Celsius. How did 1,000 people survive inside without a functional heating system designed by engineers who supposedly had no concept of thermodynamics? And where did they go to the bathroom? Not just the royal family, the servants, the guards, the cooks, the cleaners. Hundreds of people living in this structure daily, for months, in the dead of winter, with no plumbing, no sewage system. No privies built into the design. They added bathrooms later, much later, in the 1850s, a full century after construction, crude installations, retrofitted. Clearly not part of the original design. So what were they doing for 100 years? Chamber pots? In a palace that showcases the height of architectural and artistic achievement? That's the story they want you to believe. But does it make sense? Now look at the doors, specifically the main doors. 4 meters tall, solid bronze, weighing several tons each, ornately decorated with relief sculptures, perfectly balanced on hinges so precise they still work flawlessly today, 270 years later. The tolerances required to create hinges that can support that much weight, while allowing smooth movement, require industrial precision. CNC machining, metallurgical knowledge that shouldn't exist in the 1750s. But it's there, perfect, flawless. Then look at the windows, massive, floor to ceiling. Single panes of glass in many cases over 3 meters tall, perfectly clear, no distortion, no bubbles. This is before industrial glass production, before float glass, before any method existed to create panes that large without flaws. Yet there they are, hundreds of them, all identical, all perfect. How? They say hand-blown glass, artisan craftsmen. But hand-blown glass has irregularities, waves, thickness variations. These windows have none. They're industrial products, manufactured with techniques that didn't officially exist yet, unless someone else made them, someone before. Let's talk about the floors, parquet, intricate geometric patterns, made from exotic hardwoods, mahogany, rosewood, ebony, imported from distant colonies, they claim. Except many of these palaces were built before those trade routes were established, before those colonies were even accessible. So where did the wood come from? And how was it cut with such precision? The pieces fit together with tolerances of less than a millimeter, no gaps, no warping. After 250 years, that requires kiln-dried lumber, industrial saws, climate-controlled storage, none of which existed in the 1750s. But it's there, perfect, waiting for an explanation that never comes. And the ceilings. My God, the ceilings. Frescoes covering thousands of square meters. Painted, we're told, by artists lying on scaffolding, for years, with oil paints. Except the perspective is wrong. The vanishing points are mathematically perfect. Too perfect. The kind of precision you only get with optical projection, camera obscura, or something more advanced. The figures are anatomically flawless, the proportions exact, no corrections, no underdrawing visible in infrared analysis. It's as if they were traced from projected images, using technology that shouldn't exist. But does. Now step back. Think about what you're seeing. Advanced metallurgy, industrial glass, precision woodworking, optical projection, perfect acoustics, climate control systems, massive stones moved and placed with impossible accuracy, all supposedly done by societies that hadn't even invented the steam engine yet, by workers using hammers and chisels, wooden cranes, horse-drawn carts. Does that make sense? Or does it make more sense that they found these buildings, that they moved into structures built by someone else, someone more advanced, someone who disappeared, and then they wrote themselves into history as the builders? Because here's the thing. It's not just the Winter Palace, the Palace of Versailles, no bathrooms, the Royal Palace of Madrid, no bathrooms, Schönbrunn Palace in Vienna, no bathrooms. The list goes on. Dozens of massive royal residences across Europe, all built within the same narrow time period, all displaying impossible technology, all lacking basic human facilities. What kind of civilization builds palaces with gold leaf and crystal chandeliers but forgets to include toilets? Unless they didn't build them at all, unless they inherited them. Look at old photographs from the 1850s, 1860s, the streets of major European cities, St. Petersburg, Moscow, Paris, London, Berlin. The grand buildings are already there, massive, ancient-looking, weathered. But the streets are nearly empty. Where are the people? These are supposed to be thriving capitals, millions of inhabitants, centers of empire. But the photos show ghost towns, wide boulevards, empty squares, enormous structures towering over nothing. It's as if the buildings existed before the population did. As if someone built cities for millions of people, and then millions of people arrived to fill them. But who built the cities? And where did the original inhabitants go? There are records, strange records, of orphan trains, hundreds of thousands of children, orphans they claimed, shipped across continents, from Europe to America, from America to Australia, starting in the 1850s, continuing for decades. But where did they come from? They say poverty, disease, urban overcrowding, but the numbers don't add up. Hundreds of thousands of children, all orphaned, at the same time, across multiple continents, with no explanation for what killed their parents, no plague, no war, no disaster in the official record, just massive numbers of displaced children, appearing, being relocated, repopulating empty lands, empty cities, as if there had been a reset, a removal of the previous population, and a replacement with new occupants. Look at the maps, old maps, from before the 1800s. They show cities, enormous cities, in places where official history claims there was nothing. Wilderness, uncharted territory, but the maps show streets, buildings, infrastructure, Tartary, that's what they called it, a vast empire, stretching across Eurasia, shown on every map, recognized by every geographer, and then suddenly it's gone, erased. By the mid-1800s, Tartaria disappears from maps, from encyclopedias, from history, replaced with the narrative we know today. Russian expansion, Ottoman decline, European colonization. But what happened to Tartary? Where did it go? They tell us it never existed, that it was a cartographic error, a misunderstanding. But how do you misunderstand an empire that appeared on maps for 300 years? And the architecture. The Tartarian architecture. It's still there. We just call it something else now. Neoclassical, Baroque, Belle Époque, Beaux-Arts, all terms invented in the 1800s, to describe buildings that were already ancient, buildings with a unified style, a unified technology, appearing across the entire world, from Russia to America, from Europe to Asia, all built, they claim, by different cultures, different empires, with no contact, no shared knowledge. Yet the buildings are identical, same proportions, same decorative elements, same impossible engineering, as if they all came from the same source, the same civilization, before it vanished. Look at the doors again, not just in palaces, in normal buildings, town halls, train stations, libraries, banks, built in the 1800s, they tell us. But the doors are massive, 4 meters, 5 meters, 6 meters tall. Why? Who needs doors that tall? They say it's for grandeur, aesthetic choice. But that's not an answer. It's an excuse. Because when you look closely, you see something else. You see that the human-sized doors are additions, retrofitted, cut into the original giant doors, like someone took structures built for beings much larger and modified them, made them usable for normal-sized humans. And you start to see this everywhere. Staircases with steps too tall, windows starting too high above the floor, ceilings too distant, furniture that seems slightly wrong, as if we're children living in an adult's house. And the basements. This is where it gets truly strange, because almost every old building in major cities has a basement. But if you look at the windows, something's wrong. The basement windows are at street level, or below it. Sometimes 2 meters below street level, which means when these buildings were constructed, the street was lower. Much lower. The ground has risen. But ground doesn't just rise on its own, not by 2 meters, not uniformly across entire cities. Something buried these buildings. Something covered the first floor. And what we call the ground floor now used to be the second floor, or third. The original entrances are underground now, sealed, forgotten, and everyone just accepts it. They call it cultural layers. They say cities naturally build up over time. Garbage, debris, construction. But that doesn't explain why it happened everywhere, all at once, in the same narrow time period, the mid-1800s, right when Tartary disappeared, right when the orphan trains started, right when photography was invented. Convenient, isn't it? That photography appears exactly when this mysterious reset occurs, giving us a visual record, but only of the after, only of the repopulation. Never of what came before, never of what was lost. Just endless photos of empty streets, grand buildings, and small populations of confused-looking people standing in front of structures they clearly didn't build, looking like tourists, like visitors, like occupants, not creators, not builders, just inheritors of something they don't understand. Now let's talk about what these buildings were actually designed to do, because they weren't just homes, they weren't just government offices. They were machines, technological systems, and we've spent the last 150 years using them wrong, living inside technology we don't comprehend, like cavemen inhabiting a nuclear power plant, pushing buttons, pulling levers, with no idea what any of it does. Look at the spires. Every major building from this era has them. Tall, metallic, ornate, reaching into the sky. They tell us they're decorative, architectural flourishes, symbols of power and prestige. But why are they always metal? Why are they always at the highest point? Why do so many of them have spheres or unusual geometric shapes at the top? And why, in old photographs, do you see them damaged so often? Broken, missing, removed, as if someone deliberately destroyed them. Because they weren't decorations, they were antennas, receivers, part of a wireless power distribution system, harvesting atmospheric electricity, the same way Nikola Tesla described. The same technology he tried to revive before he was shut down, discredited, erased, because he was rediscovering something that already existed, something that was deliberately destroyed. Look at the interiors, the grand halls, perfect acoustics, not by accident. by design. The domes, the vaulted ceilings, the specific curves and proportions. These are resonance chambers, designed to amplify certain frequencies, to focus sound or electromagnetic waves. Some researchers believe these buildings could generate power through harmonic resonance, vibrating at frequencies that tap into the Earth's natural electromagnetic field, providing limitless clean energy, without wires, without fuel, without pollution. And we've been living inside these power plants for 150 years, using candles, then gas lamps, then crude electrical wiring, never understanding that the buildings themselves were designed to provide energy, because that knowledge was lost, or taken. And the windows, those massive, perfect windows, they're not just for light. Look at their placement, their orientation, the way they're angled. Many of these buildings have windows that align with specific solar and lunar positions, solstices, equinoxes, astronomical events. They're not random, they're calculated, precise, as if the buildings were designed to interact with celestial mechanics, to harvest specific wavelengths of light, specific energies, at specific times. The stained glass in cathedrals, it's not just artistic. The colors, the patterns, the mineral compositions of the glass, their filters, prisms, designed to separate light into specific frequencies, for purposes we can no longer understand. But the technology is still there, waiting, dormant, inside every cathedral, every palace, every grand building we inherited. Look at the heating systems, or rather, the lack of them. Because as we established, the fireplaces don't work, the chimneys are fake. So how are these enormous stone buildings heated? Stone is cold, especially in winter, especially in Russia, in Canada, in Northern Europe. Yet people lived in these structures year-round, comfortably, before central heating, before radiators, before any technology that could possibly heat such massive volumes of space, unless the buildings themselves generated heat, through some process we've forgotten. Some interaction between the structure's geometry, its materials, and natural energy fields. There are reports, old reports, of buildings staying warm without any visible heat source, of walls that were always slightly warm to the touch, of air that circulated without fans or vents, as if the buildings were alive, self-regulating, maintaining perfect temperature and air quality through mechanisms built into their very structure, and the water systems. This is perhaps the strangest part. Many of these old buildings have elaborate fountain systems, indoor fountains, cascading water features, aqueducts, channels, all supposedly gravity-fed. But when you trace the water sources, they don't make sense. The elevation is wrong. The pressure is wrong. There's no reservoir high enough to feed these systems naturally. Yet the fountains worked, for decades, sometimes centuries, without pumps, without engines. Some researchers believe these buildings had acoustic water pumps, using resonance and vibration to move water upward, against gravity, through harmonic frequency, technology that seems impossible. Yet the infrastructure is still there, the channels, the basins, the precisely angled passages, all designed for a system we no longer understand. Now look at the destruction, because this is the most damning evidence. The great fires, they happened everywhere, all in the same period. The Great Chicago Fire of 1871, the Great Boston Fire of 1872, the Great Seattle Fire of 1889, the Great Fire of London in 1666, conveniently destroying all medieval records, the fires of San Francisco, Paris, Moscow, Hamburg, Sydney. The list goes on and on. Dozens of major cities burned, coincidentally, within a narrow window of time, destroying archives, libraries, public records, birth certificates, property deeds, historical documents, everything that might tell us who really built these cities, when they were really built, who lived there before. All burned. They blame wooden construction, gas lamps, accident. But the fires always spread impossibly fast, always consumed everything, always destroyed specific buildings while leaving others untouched, as if they were targeted, deliberate, systematic erasure, and then the world's fairs. This is where it gets truly insane. Starting in the 1850s, continuing into the early 1900s, every major city hosted a World's Fair, massive temporary exhibitions, showcasing architecture and technology. But here's the thing. The buildings weren't temporary. They couldn't have been. The photographs show stone structures, marble columns, elaborate facades, sculptures, fountains, entire city districts, built, they claim, in months, for exhibitions lasting weeks, and then demolished, destroyed completely, removed without trace. Does that make sense? Building masterpieces in months, only to tear them down immediately. Or were these existing structures, ancient buildings, being revealed, showcased, and then destroyed, deliberately, under the guise of temporary exhibitions? Because once people saw them, once they asked questions, the buildings had to go. Evidence had to be erased. Look at the photographs from these fairs. The buildings are weathered, aged, stained, cracked. These aren't new constructions. These are old structures, being exposed, cleaned, temporarily opened to the public, and then buried again, or burned. The 1893 Chicago World's Fair, the White City. Hundreds of massive buildings, classical architecture, built in 1 year, they claim, by workers with hand tools, then destroyed by fire, conveniently, completely. Nothing remains. Just photographs, showing structures that look centuries old. Housing technology that seems impossible for the 1890s. Electric lights everywhere. Before widespread electrification, moving sidewalks. Before motors were common, wireless communication. Before radio. As if they were displaying technology from the previous civilization. Before destroying it. Before burying the evidence. And the official narrative. It never makes sense. They tell us these fairs celebrated human progress, industrial achievement, the height of Victorian engineering. But then why destroy it all? Why not preserve even one building? Why not keep the technology? Why burn it? Why bury it? Unless the fairs weren't celebrating our achievements. They were displaying theirs. The previous civilizations, the Tartarians. One last look, before the reset was complete, before the narrative was locked in, before history was rewritten. Look at the population records. This is statistical proof. In 1800, St. Petersburg had a population of around 220,000. By 1900, it had grown to 1.4 million. That's more than 6 times growth in 1 century. But look at the infrastructure, the buildings, the palaces, the cathedrals, the government complexes. They were all there in 1800. Already built, already ancient, which means they were built for the 1900 population, not the 1800 population. Someone built a city for 1.4 million people, and then only 220,000 showed up. Or rather, only 220,000 were left, after whatever happened, after the reset. And over the next century, new populations moved in, repopulated, filled the empty structures, and convinced themselves they had built them. The same pattern repeats everywhere: Moscow, Paris, London, Berlin, New York. Cities with infrastructure far exceeding their historical populations, as if they were built for more people, or different people. And then those people vanished, leaving behind their buildings, their technology, their knowledge, for us to inherit, to misunderstand, to claim as our own. Now think about the technology we're told was invented in the late 1800s. Electric lights, telephones, radio, photography, automobiles, motion pictures, all appearing within a few decades. After thousands of years of relatively slow progress, suddenly, explosion, rapid advancement, simultaneous discoveries across multiple fields. Almost as if someone found a library, an archive, technical manuals from the previous civilization, and started reverse engineering, patenting, claiming credit. Tesla didn't invent wireless energy. He rediscovered it, Edison didn't invent the light bulb. He commercialized existing technology. The Industrial Revolution wasn't revolution, it was recovery. Salvage, picking through the ruins, learning from what was left behind, and they've been hiding it ever since, rewriting textbooks, controlling education, mocking anyone who questions, labeling them conspiracy theorists, pseudoscientists, cranks. Because if people knew, if people understood, that we're living in the ruins of something greater, that history is a lie, that we were reset, that advanced civilization existed before and was destroyed, then everything changes. All power structures, all institutions, all claims to authority, they all collapse, because they're built on the lie, the official narrative, the carefully constructed timeline that makes them the pinnacle of human achievement, when in reality, they're primitives, occupying buildings they didn't build, using technology they don't understand, ruling over populations kept ignorant of their own true history. Look around you. The next time you walk through an old city, look at the buildings. Really look. See the buried first floors, the impossibly tall doors, the non-functional chimneys, the decorative spires that were once functional, the perfect acoustics, the aligned windows. The evidence is everywhere. In every major city, on every continent, all telling the same story. We inherited this world. We didn't build it. Someone came before, someone more advanced. And they disappeared, suddenly, completely, leaving behind empty cities, perfect infrastructure, advanced technology, and us. The survivors, the occupants, the children playing in a house built by giants, pressing buttons we don't understand, living among machines we can't comprehend, told we're the pinnacle, the peak, the greatest humanity has ever been, when in truth, we're the remnants, the leftovers, trying desperately to remember, to rebuild, to understand what was lost. And maybe that's why they hide it. Maybe that's why they burn the evidence, rewrite the history, mock the questions. Because admitting the truth means admitting we're not special. We're not the first. We're not even the best. We're just the latest attempt, the current experiment, living in the ruins of the last one. And if it happened before, if a civilization more advanced than ours was destroyed, reset, erased, then it can happen again. It will happen again. And everything we build, everything we believe, everything we think we know, could be gone, forgotten, buried, within a single generation. Leaving behind only our buildings, our technology, our mysteries, for the next occupants, the next inheritors, to puzzle over, to misunderstand, to claim as their own. The cycle continues, the pattern repeats, and we are not the builders, we are the survivors, living among the ruins, forgetting, always forgetting, until someone asks the question they don't want asked. Why are there no bathrooms in Tartarian palaces? And once you ask that question, once you see that detail, everything else unravels, the entire lie collapses, and you realize, we've been living in someone else's world all along,